Welcome to Four Favorites, brought to you by the Quiet on Set podcast. I'm your host, Jürgen Graf, and today I'm joined by the co-host of the Quiet on Set podcast, Lachlan Thiele.
That's me. That is me.
Yeah.
I am the co-host.
On Four Favorites, we talk about our guests' favorite films to a specific theme, genre, or other kind of topic. This month, in the horror month of October, we'll talk about favorite horror films. So, welcome, Lachlan. The two of us have been friends for years now, so I feel like I know a bit about where your picks could go. I'm obviously not leaking anything or making any speculations. First up, I gotta ask, is horror even a genre that you tend to enjoy maybe over other genres? Is it one of your favorites? Or do you? How much do you care about horror?
I don't. I wouldn't say horror is
right.
I don't enjoy horror films. Like I don't like going to a film and going like I want to be scared.
You don't want to be a scared little boy. You want to be a brave boy
who
gets lots of laughs and isn't scared.
No, but look, I still appreciate horror films. I've definitely seen a lot, and I do know a lot of successful directors who kickstarted their career in horror. And I know that when we were both at film school, a lot of the professors, I should say, suggested that you should do horror because horror is cheap and easy and that will kickstart your career. And I'm like, I probably wouldn't want to. I just don't have an interest in making horror films. Like I've dipped my hand in it here and there with my own personal film career. I've done a couple of horror things a while back, but I've just never felt like it's a genre that intrigues me. Now, I definitely will say there are great horror films out there that I've watched. We're going to name 4 of them, but I have a couple of that aren't on my list. I think that The Witch was incredible as a horror film. It definitely scared me. I would definitely say that on top of that as well, there's a lot of classic horror films and modern ones. I would say I love Scream because it's such a satire on horror itself, and I would definitely also put into that list like classic horror being things like Un Chien Andalou, which is like a really old timey film, and a lot of films that had start with German Expressionism had this horror aspect to it, and that's where a lot of horror films get a lot of their style from, is German Expressionism. Here I'm flexing some film knowledge.
Damn, okay, I was about to say, man.
So as much as I on the main podcast act like that guy who likes to watch shoot pew
Marvel
pew Star
DC,
Wars laser beams, Marvel DC, I'm fucking with you. As much as I act like that guy, I do have a bit of film knowledge in me. Yeah. But no, you're about to see my horror favorites, and it took me a little while to write this up. I wanted a bit of diversity with my list, but when I came down to it, these are the 4 that I picked.
I guess let's kick it off with a tried and true classic. Do you have one of those on your list?
I do. I'm not going to say these in any particular order. This isn't like my dead favorite to like my 4th
Just
favorite.
4 favorites.
I'm going to start with what I would consider to be the horror one in this list. That's the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Don't ask me why. I don't know why. I'm not as I said, I'm not a big horror person, but when I watched this for the first time, the cheesiness of it, the real like grungy look of the film, and Leatherface as well was all just super intriguing to me. Now I think I watched I watched the Texas Chainsaw Massacre for the first time. I think it was probably when I was 15 or 16. By the way, I'm not referring to the Texas, not the Texas, but Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
The Texas Chainsaw Massacre from Netflix. No.
Terrible.
The one from Michael Bay.
The Texas Chainsaw Massacre is my favorite. I don't know. It's something about it where it's just this insane little story, because it's not a very long film. It's only about 90 minutes long. And it's so exciting to have this iconic, not as iconic as like Jason or Mike Myers, but Leatherface has been this kind of like underneath all of those guys, but he's a bit of a. They try to make him like Jason and Mike Myers in the latest one, but this one was just, he's creepy, it's stylish, it's cool, and it has this beautiful little thing at the end where he's just throwing the chainsaw all over the place. The kills aren't as crazy as you might have seen in a lot of other, like, I wouldn't say they're as iconic as what I would say
Halloween. Yeah.
Nightmare on Elm Street
Hmm.
or Halloween, I would definitely say,
Yeah.
I would say those kills are more iconic, but for me, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre would be my favorite of the classic horrors, which is why it's on this list.
It's one of the films that probably will make it into my top four as well. So bit of an
Oh,
overlap here. Just but this is not about me. This is not about me. This is
stop
about
double
you,
dipping.
about your
Stop double
favorites. Yeah,
dipping.
sorry. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But Lachlan, maybe let's go to a different route, maybe a more modern film that has made it into your top four.
Yeah, so this is a bit of an interesting one. I don't think a lot of people have seen it.
Mm-hmm.
It comes at night.
Mm.
Now,
Yes.
I don't think you've seen It Comes at Night. Have you
No, it's been on
seen
my
It Comes
watch
at Night?
list
No.
for quite a
Okay.
bit because I do really like Trey Edward Schultz, but no, I haven't caught up with It Comes at Night.
I was lucky enough to see this in cinemas when it came out. And
Hmm.
again, I'm a sucker for like hour and a half long films. I love movies that you just go
Yeah.
in and out of. And there was just something about this film that just really locked me in, and I was fascinated by. Now, it's
Hmm.
A24. It's one of my very early on A24 films, which kind of
Yeah.
locked them onto my radar of I should watch. It's weird that we say this with a production company. I've said this a couple of times that there's not a lot of production companies. You don't sit there and you go, "Man, I love Warner Brother Pictures." You don't really say that. But with A24, they
Yeah.
built this weird relationship with their audience. But anyway, okay. So it stars Joel Edgerton, who
Hmm.
great, first of all, excellent. And it's kind of this like post-apocalyptic in a way world. It's about him, his wife, and his son on
Hmm.
this kind of like very rural farm area, and it's this kind of scary thing that comes at night.
Yeah.
It's really hard for me to describe this film because it never delivers on its this, like a lot of horror films, they go, "This is the creature. Here it is." It never does that.
Yeah.
And it's quite fascinating.
Yeah.
Very similar to The Witch. I would
Right.
say It
Yeah.
Comes at Night shares a lot of like a lot of familiar ideas with The Witch. I would definitely say The
Hmm.
Witch is the better film, but It Comes at Night for some reason stuck with me for
Hmm.
for a while, and I really loved it. And I remember because I went and saw it with one of my mates. I remember we watched it, and I remember some people did walk out of the cinema. They were like, "This is not for me." I remember the person in front of me when
Yeah.
they stood up. They were like, "That was shit," because it's one of those like artistic art house films that wouldn't really deliver to mainstream audiences that are looking for that jump
Hmm.
scare, looking for that quick scare. But
Yeah.
I don't like that when it comes to horror films. So, I haven't got
Yeah.
those films in my list, but It Comes at Night
Hmm.
was just, yeah, it blew my socks off.
Yeah, interesting. It's jumped up to the top of my watch list after that description. I've been meaning to catch up with it, so Lachlan, I'll certainly do that. And I think horror
Good.
is a genre that is oftentimes adjacent to some other genre, where it uses horror elements to tell a differently themed story. Maybe it is based in sci-fi. Maybe it is more on the character side, where it's more of a drama or even a comedy. Is there one on your list that maybe would fit into kind of that category?
Definitely, definitely. One of my favorite series of all time is the Alien series, which the
Mm,
original Alien is definitely a horror in a way. And I would say It Comes at Night is definitely more of a thriller drama. And I guess it's again
hmm.
to elaborate on that as well. You asked me, do I like horror? And
Yeah.
I would I say no in the sense that I don't like films that identify just as horror. There are films that
Yeah.
have horror aspects that I absolutely love, and I don't really consider Alien or It Comes at Night as horror films because I would
Hmm.
consider It Comes at Night as more of a thriller, as it's very, you know, stressful. And I would say the
Yeah.
same with Alien. Alien definitely is a sci-fi thriller in my eyes more than it is a horror film. I love Alien. I really
Hmm.
do. I like Aliens a little bit more, but I love Alien. I think it's
Mm.
great. Um, Again, I remember my first time watching it was I was on the internet. My love of film started in high school, and I was on the internet researching horror films again. Well, this is where my
Mhm.
like how I've discovered most of these films. And they were like listing the Watch Mojo top 10 best horror, sci-fi, horror, action, horror
Yeah.
blank, movies of all
Mhm.
time, and Alien kept popping up, Alien, 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 and I had no idea. So
Mhm.
I eventually got you might have seen it on the podcast before, that big DVD box set with all the Alien movies in it. And I
Yeah.
finally got to sat down and watch all of them, and whoo baby, I was blown away. I was just something about it. It was scary, terrifying. The I can't remember the artist's name who designed the alien and all of the sets of the alien craft, but that very like organic style of design was etched into my mind as absolutely
Mhm.
terrifying. Again, I would consider it a sci-fi first before I would consider it a horror, and I think that it's an excellent sci-fi. It creates this terrifying creature up against one of the most badass women in history.
Mhm.
No, I'm not talking about the character she plays. I'm talking about Sigourney Weaver. She's the most badass woman in fucking history, hands down.
Yeah. She's
Um,
amazing.
it builds this, it's still terrifying. The
Yeah.
the chest burster coming out is freaking etched in my mind. It's like, ugh, that's
Mhm.
disgusting and terrifying, and blood spats over the face. I remember like scenes of the ships, and like I remember like the face hugger and like the egg opening up. It's like there's so much of Alien that's etched into my mind, and I love
Mhm.
watching it every time. It's one of those films I just keep going back and back to, and it's so great. And it's also got one of
Yeah.
the coolest like slogan lines ever, and it's in space no one can hear you scream. That's single-handedly the best like sentence ever said,
Mhm.
and it created this foundation of an excellent series that has its flaws. I do agree with that, and it's become more of an action film than it has been a horror film.
Yeah.
But no, Alien for me is one of my favorite horror films, even though I get I say it's sci-fi, but horror aspects. It terrified me when I was younger, and I
Mhm.
still get uncomfortable with face hugger on my face. That makes me
Yeah.
claustrophobic in a way.
It is. It never leaves you. I think it has that certain iconic nature that even if you're not even if you haven't watched it, you've kind of seen the film, you know?
That's what it is. Okay, so funny thing.
Yeah.
When I was watching Nope,
Mhm.
there's a scene in Nope which you have a shot in the spaceship of it crushing uh a person. Like they're like
Yeah.
all crushed up together, and I felt so
Mhm.
claustrophobic, and I was trying to remember what movie it was that made me feel like that, and it was the face hugger in Alien. It only just occurred to me,
Mhm.
funnily enough. Because I remember watching it and I was like, that's the only part in Nope where I actually felt uncomfortable and claustrophobic. And I
Yeah.
was like trying to remember, there was another movie that I felt very similar to a while ago, and it was Alien, because I remember watching it the first time, face hugger, and I was just like, oh, that okay, thank you.
Well,
Okay,
well, here we
just
go. We
remembered.
cleared it up. And I mean, if you're sleeping on Alien, at least by now, go give it a try. I think it's certainly worth it. Lastly, I think horror films have become way more available to the public. People really seeking them out. Has there been
Hmm.
maybe a streaming film or a film that is like shortly after it premiered had a premiere on a streaming service where people
Yep,
are expecting that type of content on your list?
yep. Perfectly rolls me on to my fourth horror film, um, Hubby Halloween. Uh,
Yes, of course. I would say
Netflix
Uncut Gems
streamed.
might be a horror
Man,
film,
you
just
set that up
how it
so
feels,
well. I had that joke
But
written down on the
I
side that I was like, I'm gonna bring up
oh
Hubby
really?
Halloween somewhere. He's got to
I had
really
no
segue in it
intention.
somehow, and that was perfect.
Yeah.
That was perfect. Yes, it did premiere on streaming where I am. It
Mhm.
had a US release, and
Yeah.
I I remember a story of why it didn't release in Australia, and it was because the executives thought this movie was so mind-boggling that Australian audiences wouldn't be able to handle it, so they're gonna release it on Netflix instead of cinema. And I
Yeah.
found that so insulting and funny that I had to get my hands on this movie as soon as it came out, and obviously it came out on
Mhm.
Netflix, which is again a funny thing. Sorry, I'm still laughing at the hubby Halloween joke. Uh, this movie's this movie's Annihilation. Um,
Mhm.
Again, it's a sci-fi horror. I'm a bit of a sci-fi fiend, if you couldn't tell. I love
Yeah.
the the world of sci-fi, especially anything where it involves something that you don't understand. One that's
Mhm.
alien when you first watch it because you have no idea what this creature is, and that's the whole point of Annihilation. Annihilation one that has one of the best terrifying, tense scenes, and that's the scene with the bear that has
Mhm.
incredible horror aspects to it. And it also has a lot of imagination horror, is how I like to say
Mhm.
it. Like cosmic horror, cosmic horror would be what I refer to as, I guess, Lovecraftian horror, like the horror of the
Mhm.
unknown. And I guess that's
Mhm.
kind of what Annihilation is. It's the horror of the unknown, stuff you've never seen before. And
Yeah.
Annihilation is really interesting in how it's presented because it's set up as this kick-ass group of uh, scientists going into this shimmer and discovering as time goes on these weird changes to the landscape and
Yeah.
also to themselves. And it's also a big story about loss and I guess in a lot of different ways how you struggle with certain things. I'm
Yeah.
blanking on the
Mhm.
right word to use here because there's one character who is once suicidal, one's going
Yeah.
through loss of her husband, or yeah,
Mhm.
loss of husband, things like that. Each character has their, you know, dark side that the shimmer is essentially shining a light on, and each of them
Yeah.
have, in a way, a aspect of their lives refracted onto the landscape, and eventually some of them die in ways that relate to their uh, illness or you know
Yeah, the
deep dark
struggles.
depression.
Yeah.
The struggles,
Mhm.
exactly. Annihilation was just one of those films that was a bit at first was a bit hard to watch, and I didn't really come
Yeah.
around to it until the second viewing. I remember definitely watching it and being unimpressed with it, but it wasn't until the second viewing where I sat down and thought about it a little bit more, and I went, "Oh, okay." And I watched a couple of video essays
Mhm.
on YouTube, and I definitely
Yeah.
was thinking about it a little bit more, and it's definitely one of those films that
Mhm.
you take away, you think about it, you get a lot more out of it. And again, to speak
Yeah.
about the horror aspects of it, again the scene with that bear is absolutely terrifying. I
Mhm.
thought the alligator scene, I was like, oh god, it's gonna be this stupid, horror mutated creature horror
Mhm.
at first, but then it evolves into this bear that's it's refracted. And for those of you who haven't seen Annihilation, essentially inside this area, uh, molecules, I guess, are switched and changed between different objects. So you might
Mhm.
all of a sudden wake up with like a flower growing out of your arm because the flower molecule landed on
Yeah.
refracted onto your skin, and there's a hand growing out of the ground instead. And very interesting
Mhm.
concept.
Yeah.
And eventually there's this bear that has had the voice of someone that it's killed, and it's saying like the
Mhm.
screaming sounds out of its voice instead of a roar. And it's got a skull for a face. Like every part of that scene was so well crafted. And again, I'm not going to say that this is my favorite horror film of all
Mhm.
time, but Alex Garland is a excellent creator, and we know that he recently did Men this year, which I would say was a bit more, I would say, isn't as scary, but definitely more into the realm of you have to think about it quite a bit to get the message across kind of film.
Yeah.
But again, this film has, Natalie Portman, Tessa Thompson, Oscar Isaac. It's got Benedict Wong in it. It's got a lot of
Yeah.
really good performers in it, and I feel like it was pretty much a sleeper hit when it first came out. But
Mhm.
I think people came around to really liking it after a second or third viewing.
It certainly is one of those films that is perfect to be streaming on Netflix, as you can just rinse and repeat, straight go into a second watch. And maybe even, like you said, I had a similar experience watching video essays and people dissecting, interpreting the film. I think there's a lot of things that you can see in it. And it's also something really pretty to look at. It's a stunning film. So yeah, those are your 4 favorites, Lachlan. Thank you so much for sharing that list with us.
No, thank you, sir.
No worries, no worries. I'll always be here in my chair waiting for you to pop
Yep.
in and talk about films. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing your 4 favorites with us. Now, normally, when we have a guest on, I would ask them to shout out whatever they've been working on, what they want to shout out. But I feel like I could kind of do that for you because, it kind of is a bit overlapping for the two of us.
I do the Quiet on Set podcast with my co-host,
Really? Tell me about
Ewan
it.
Graf.
Yes. Also, if you've been watching this far, you might have had your own thoughts on Lachlan's picks, or you might have your own full favorite lists. So be sure to drop those in the comments below. You can also just link us a list if you got more than 4. And if you rank them, whatever, we love to see a letterbox list, so you can drop them in the comments as well. So thank you so much for tuning in, and don't forget to subscribe for more of upcoming 4 favorites episode and the Quiet on Set podcast that releases every Tuesday here on our YouTube channel. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.